The morning Beatrice Oakley realized she was about to lose everything her father built. 3 horses kicked through the fence and nearly trampled her into the Texas dust. She stood in the middle of the corral at sunrise, her hands shaking as she gripped the lead rope attached to the bay mare circling her like a predator. The horse's eyes were wild, nostrils flaring, and every attempt Beatrice made to calm her only seemed to make things worse. Behind her, the other 2 horses paced and snorted, feeding off the mare's anxiety. This was the 3rd morning in a row she had tried to work with them, and each day ended the same way, with her picking herself up from the dirt, bruised and no closer to breaking these animals than when she started. Terlingua, Texas was not a forgiving place in the summer of 1882, and the ranch her father had left her when he died 6 months ago was even less so. Beatrice was 22 years old, unmarried, and according to every man in town, completely incapable of running a horse ranch on her own. The bank had given her until the end of August to prove she could make the operation profitable, or they would seize the land to cover her father's debts. She had 8 weeks left, and 3 unbroken horses that a cattle buyer from El Paso had already paid half price for, with the promise of full payment upon delivery of trained, rideable mounts. The mare suddenly reared, and Beatrice stumbled backward, losing her grip on the rope. The horse charged toward the fence, and Beatrice felt her heart sink as she watched months of potential income about to destroy itself against the wooden rails. "Easy now." The voice came from behind her, low and steady, and Beatrice spun around to see a man standing just outside the corral. He was tall, with dark hair that needed cutting and clothes covered in trail dust. His face was weathered in that way that made it hard to guess his age, though she figured he could not be much past 30. He had both hands resting on the top rail of the fence, his posture relaxed despite the chaos inside the corral. "Who are you?" Beatrice demanded, trying to catch her breath. The mare had stopped her charge and now stood in the corner, sides heaving. "Ezra Patterson," the man said. "I am looking for work. Heard in town you might need help with some horses." "Heard wrong," Beatrice said, though even as she said it she knew it was foolish. She needed help desperately, but the last thing she needed was another man trying to take over what was rightfully hers. The ranch hands her father had employed all quit within weeks of his death, saying they would not take orders from a woman. The blacksmith had refused to shoe her horses without a man present to approve the work. Even the minister had suggested she sell the ranch and find a husband to take care of her properly. Ezra studied her for a moment, his gray eyes unreadable. "You are about to lose that mare through the fence. She will break a leg and then you will have lost whatever money you were counting on her for." Beatrice clenched her jaw. He was right, which only made her angrier. "I can handle my own horses." "I can see that," Ezra said, and there was no mockery in his tone, just a statement of fact. "But maybe you could handle them better with some help. I will work for meals and a place to sleep. No wages until you think I have earned them." She stared at him, suspicious. "Why would you work for nothing?" "Did not say nothing. Said meals and a place to sleep." He tilted his head toward the mare. "And I have been on the trail for 3 weeks. I am tired, hungry, and this heat is making my horse miserable. A few days' rest would do us both good. If I can help you with those horses while I am here, seems like a fair trade." Beatrice looked at the mare, then at the other 2 horses, then at the house that needed repairs, the fences that needed mending, the 100 other things she could not do on her own. Pride was expensive, and she was running out of time to indulge in it. 3 days, she said. "You can stay 3 days. There is a bunkhouse behind the barn. It is not much, but it is dry. I will bring you supper tonight." Ezra nodded and pushed away from the fence. "I will tend to my horse and get settled. After that, I would like to watch you work with these three for a bit. See what we are dealing with." Beatrice wanted to argue, but he was already walking toward a buckskin gelding tied to the hitching post near the barn. She turned back to the horses, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake. By late afternoon, Beatrice was certain she had made a terrible mistake, though not for the reasons she expected. Ezra had spent most of the day simply watching, sitting on the fence while she worked with the horses. He did not offer advice or criticism, did not try to take over or tell her what she was doing wrong. He just watched with that quiet, focused attention that made her acutely aware of every misstep, every moment of uncertainty. The bay mare, whom Beatrice had named Rosie despite her father's warning about naming animals meant for sale, was the most difficult. She had been born on the ranch 3 years ago, the daughter of her father's best breeding mare, but something had gone wrong in her training. Her father had been ill by then, too weak to work with the horses himself, and the hand he had hired to break her had been rough. Too rough. By the time Beatrice understood what was happening and fired the man, Rosie had learned to fear anyone who approached with a rope or saddle. The other 2 horses, a gray gelding and a chestnut stallion, were younger and less damaged, but they took their cues from Rosie. If she was anxious, they were anxious. If she fought, they fought. Beatrice was trying to get a halter on the gray gelding when he suddenly swung his head and caught her in the shoulder, sending her sprawling into the dirt. Pain shot through her arm, and she bit back a curse. Before she could get up, Ezra was in the corral, moving between her and the horses with an ease that made it look effortless. "I am fine," Beatrice said, pushing herself to her feet. Her shoulder throbbed, and she could already feel the bruise forming, but she had endured worse. Ezra did not look at her. He was watching the horses, his body language relaxed but alert. "I know you are fine," he said, "but these horses are not, and you working with them while you are hurt is just going to make things worse." "I do not have time to wait until I am not hurt," Beatrice snapped. "I am always hurt lately. That is what happens when you are trying to do everything yourself." Ezra finally looked at her, and there was something in his expression that made her throat tighten. Not pity exactly, but understanding. "You do not have to do everything yourself, not while I am here. You are only here for 3 days. "Maybe," Ezra said, "but let me work with them for the rest of today. You go inside, put some cold water on that shoulder and rest. Tomorrow you can tell me if I know what I am doing." Beatrice wanted to argue, but the pain in her shoulder was getting worse, and watching him stand there among the 3 nervous horses, she realized something surprising. They were calmer with him than they had been with her all day. Rosie still had her ears pinned back, and the stallion was still dancing nervously, but they were not panicking. They were watching him the same way he had watched Beatrice all day, with wary attention but not outright fear. "Fine," she said. "But if you get yourself killed, I am not explaining it to anyone in town." Ezra smiled for the first time since arriving, and it transformed his face entirely. "If I get myself killed, I expect you will be too busy with the horses to worry about explaining anything." Beatrice left the corral, glancing back once to see Ezra standing perfectly still, letting the horses come to terms with his presence. She walked toward the house, her shoulder aching with every step, and tried to ignore the small flutter of hope building in her chest. By the time she brought supper to the bunkhouse that evening, Beatrice had convinced herself not to hope for anything. Hope was dangerous, and disappointment was something she could not afford right now. She balanced the tray carefully as she knocked on the bunkhouse door, the smell of beef stew and fresh biscuits making her own stomach rumble. She had not eaten since breakfast, too focused on the horses to stop for a meal. Ezra opened the door, and she was struck by how different he looked cleaned up. He had washed the trail dust from his face and arms, and his hair was damp, slicked back from his forehead. He still wore the same worn clothes, but they were brushed clean, and she could see the care he had taken with them despite their age. "Smells good," he said, taking the tray from her. "You did not have to bring it all the way out here. I could have come to the house." "It is not any trouble," Beatrice said, though the walk from the house to the bunkhouse had made her shoulder ache worse. "I wanted to ask about the horses. How did it go after I left?" Ezra set the tray on the small table near the door and gestured for her to come inside. The bunkhouse was simple, just one room with a narrow bed, a table, and a chair. There was a small stove in the corner that her father had installed years ago for the ranch hands who stayed through winter. Ezra had already made himself at home, his saddlebags hanging neatly on a peg by the door, his bedroll spread out on the mattress. "It went well," he said, sitting down at the table and indicating she should take the chair. When she hesitated, he stood back up and dragged over a crate from the corner, settling onto it instead so she could have the chair. It was such a small gesture, but it caught her off guard. "I did not try to do much. Just let them get used to me being in the space with them. Moved around a bit, talked to them, let them smell me. That is all." Beatrice sat down, telling herself it was only because her legs were tired, not because the crate looked uncomfortable and Ezra had given her the chair without a second thought. "That is all," Ezra confirmed. He picked up a biscuit and broke it in half, steam rising from the soft center. "You cannot train a horse that does not trust you. Everything else comes after trust. Those three have been pushed too hard by someone who did not care about earning it." Beatrice felt her cheeks flush. "I care about earning it. I have been trying to be gentle with them." "I know you have," Ezra said, and there was no criticism in his voice. "I watched you all day, remember? You have good instincts, you are patient, and you pay attention to what they are telling you. But you are also desperate, and horses can feel that. They know when someone needs something from them, and it makes them nervous." "Of course I am desperate," Beatrice said, her voice sharper than she intended. "The bank is going to take my ranch if I cannot deliver these horses trained and ready to ride. I have 8 weeks left, and I am no closer to breaking them than when I started. I cannot afford to spend weeks just letting them get used to me." Ezra finished chewing a bite of stew before he responded. "How long have you been working with them?" 6 weeks, since the buyer made the deposit. "And in 6 weeks, how much progress have you made?" Beatrice opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The truth was, she had made almost no progress. If anything, the horses were more skittish now than when she started, wound up by her own anxiety and frustration. "I will make you a deal," Ezra said, setting down his spoon and meeting her eyes. "Give me 2 weeks. Let me work with these horses the way they need to be worked with, no rushing, no desperation. If I cannot have them ready to ride by then, I will leave, and you will not owe me anything. But if I can do it, you let me stay on and help you with the rest of the ranch work until you are back on your feet." "I cannot afford to pay you," Beatrice said. "Not until the buyer pays the rest of what he owes." Did not ask for pay. Asked for meals and a place to sleep, same as before. Ezra leaned back on his crate, studying her with those calm gray eyes. "I have been working ranches since I was 14 years old. I know horses and I know hard work. You need help and I need a place to stay for a while. Seems like we might be able to help each other." Beatrice wanted to ask why he needed a place to stay, where he had come from, why he was willing to work for so little. But the exhaustion she had been fighting for months was catching up with her, and the hope she had tried to suppress was blooming again despite her best efforts. 2 weeks, she said. "If you cannot do it in 2 weeks, you leave. I cannot afford to waste more time than that." 2 weeks, Ezra agreed. He picked up his spoon again and returned to his meal, and Beatrice realized she had been dismissed. She stood up, her shoulder protesting, and walked to the door. "Beatrice," Ezra said as she reached for the handle. She turned back. "You should eat something and get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." She nodded and stepped out into the warm evening air, closing the door behind her. As she walked back to the house, she tried not to think about how easily he had said her name, or how much she had liked hearing it in his low, steady voice. The next morning, Beatrice woke before dawn, as she always did. She dressed quickly in her work clothes, a simple cotton dress that had belonged to her mother, faded from years of washing but still sturdy. She braided her dark hair and pinned it up, then splashed cold water on her face from the basin in her room. Her shoulder was stiff and sore, the bruise a deep purple that spread from her collarbone to her upper arm, but the pain was manageable. She made breakfast in the kitchen that still smelled like her father, like leather and tobacco, and the peppermint candies he always kept in his pocket. Sometimes she forgot he was gone, started to call out to him before remembering that the house was empty except for her. This morning, though, she remembered someone else was on the property, and she made extra eggs and bacon without really thinking about it. She was carrying the plate of food across the yard when she saw Ezra was already in the corral with the horses. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and he stood in the center of the space with Rosie circling him at a distance. The mare's ears were forward, watching him with curiosity rather than fear, and Beatrice stopped walking to watch. Ezra was not doing anything remarkable, just standing there with his arms relaxed at his sides, occasionally taking a step or two in one direction or another. But there was something about the way he moved, the quiet confidence in his posture that made even Beatrice feel calmer. After a few minutes, Rosie took a tentative step toward him, then another. Ezra did not move, did not reach out, just waited. The mare came close enough to stretch her neck out and sniff his shoulder, and Beatrice held her breath. Rosie blew out through her nostrils and took a step back. Ezra still did not move. The mare circled him once more, then approached again, this time close enough to bump his arm with her nose. Ezra slowly, carefully, lifted one hand and let her smell it. When she did not pull away, he touched her neck, just a brief gentle contact, then dropped his hand back to his side. Beatrice felt something tight in her chest loosen. In 6 weeks of working with Rosie, she had never gotten the mare to approach her willingly, let alone allow herself to be touched without a rope or halter forcing compliance. Ezra had done it in less than 24 hours. "You are up early," Ezra said without turning around. Rosie's ears flicked toward Beatrice and the mare moved away from Ezra, but she did not bolt. She just stood watching, her body language wary but not panicked. "I made breakfast," Beatrice said, holding up the plate. "I thought you might be hungry." Ezra walked toward the fence, moving slowly so as not to startle the horses. When he climbed out of the corral, Beatrice could see the pleased expression on his face. "She is coming around faster than I expected. Whoever hurt her did damage, but it is not as deep as it could have been. She still wants to trust people. She just needs a reason to believe it is safe." "My father hired a man named Carson to break her," Beatrice said, handing him the plate. "I did not realize what he was doing until I came out one morning and found Rosie bleeding from where his spurs had cut her. I fired him on the spot, but the damage was done." Ezra's expression darkened. Men like that should not be allowed near horses. They think breaking means breaking the spirit, when really it just means teaching partnership. He took a bite of eggs, then looked at her with surprise. "This is good." "Really good." Beatrice felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It is just eggs. Eggs cooked properly with actual seasoning. You would be surprised how many people cannot manage that." He ate standing up, leaning against the fence, and Beatrice found herself watching the way the morning light caught in his dark hair, the way his shoulders filled out his shirt. She looked away quickly, annoyed with herself. "What is the plan for today?" she asked, focusing on the horses instead. "More of the same. Let them get comfortable with me, start teaching them that people in the corral means good things, not bad things. In a few days, I will start introducing the halter and lead rope, but only when they are ready." He finished the eggs and set the plate on the fence post. "You should rest that shoulder today. Give it time to heal. I have work to do. The fences need mending, and I need to check on the cattle in the north pasture. I can check the cattle after I work with the horses. Where are the fence materials?" Beatrice frowned. "You are here to work with the horses, not do my other chores." "I am here to help you keep this ranch running," Ezra said. "The horses are part of that, but they are not the whole thing. Show me what needs doing and I will do it." "Why?" The question came out more plaintive than Beatrice intended. "Why would you do all of this for just meals and a place to sleep? You could get hired anywhere with your skills. You could demand real wages." Ezra was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the horizon where the sun was fully up now, burning away the last of the morning coolness. "I have had real wages," he said finally. "I have worked big ranches, been a foreman, saved up enough money to think about buying my own place someday. But I have also learned that money is not the only thing that matters. Sometimes a man needs a place where he can work without being asked questions he does not want to answer. Sometimes he needs a little peace and quiet. This place, your ranch, it feels peaceful. I would like to help you keep it, if you will let me." There was something in his voice, a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion, that made Beatrice wonder what questions he was running from. But she understood the need for peace and quiet, for a place that felt like home even when everything else was falling apart. "All right," she said. "The fence materials are in the barn. I will show you which sections need repair." They spent the morning working side by side, Beatrice pointing out the broken rails and rotted posts, while Ezra took measurements and made notes. He had a small leather journal he kept in his shirt pocket, and he sketched out a plan for the repairs with the kind of careful attention that told Beatrice he had done this many times before. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who knew hard work, but they moved with precision and care. By midday, the heat was oppressive, the kind of dry, relentless heat that made the air shimmer and turned metal too hot to touch. Beatrice went inside to make lunch while Ezra worked with the horses again, and when she came back out with sandwiches and cold water, she found him sitting in the shade of the barn with all 3 horses standing nearby. They were not close enough to touch, but they were no longer treating him like a threat. "That is remarkable," she said, handing him a sandwich. "I have never seen them this calm." "They are good horses," Ezra said, accepting the food with a nod of thanks. They just needed someone to show them it was safe to be calm. He bit into the sandwich and made an appreciative sound. "You are a good cook. That is not as common as it should be." "My mother taught me before she died," Beatrice said, settling into the shade beside him. It felt natural, sitting there together, and that should have worried her but somehow did not. She used to say that cooking was an act of love, that you could tell how much someone cared by the effort they put into a meal. "She was right," Ezra said. "My mother said something similar. She died when I was young, but I remember her bread. She made the best bread I have ever tasted, before or since." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the horses grazing nearby, the sound of cicadas loud in the midday heat. Beatrice found herself studying Ezra's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he squinted against the sun. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way, but it was more than that. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that made her feel safer than she had felt in months. "What made you decide to work with horses?" she asked. Ezra finished his sandwich before answering. "My father was a horse trainer, one of the best in Missouri, or so people said. He could take the meanest, most stubborn animal and turn it into a partner. I learned everything from watching him." His expression grew distant. "He died when I was 16. Horse kicked him in the head. After that, I left home and started working ranches wherever I could find work." "I am sorry," Beatrice said softly. "Losing a parent is hard. Losing them suddenly is even harder." "It is," Ezra agreed. "But you learned to carry it. What about you? How did your father die?" His heart gave out. "The doctor said it had been failing for a while, but my father never said anything. He just kept working until one morning he did not wake up." Beatrice felt the familiar ache in her chest, the one that came every time she talked about him. "He was a good man. Stubborn, set in his ways, but good. He built this ranch from nothing, and now I am trying not to let it fall apart." "You are doing better than you think," Ezra said. "This place is well maintained considering you have been running it alone. The fact that you are still here, still fighting, that says something about your character." Beatrice felt tears prick at her eyes and looked away embarrassed. "I do not feel like I am doing well. I feel like I am drowning, and no matter how hard I swim, I cannot reach the surface." Ezra set down his empty plate and shifted slightly so he was facing her. "Then stop swimming alone. Let me help you. Let me be here, not just for the horses, but for all of it. For meals and a place to sleep," Beatrice said, trying to inject some lightness into her voice even as her heart was racing. "For as long as you will have me," Ezra said, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I am good at this work, Beatrice. I am good at horses and fences and all the 100 things a ranch needs. Let me prove it to you." She wanted to say yes. She wanted to trust him, to believe that he could help her save the ranch, and that his motivations were as simple as he claimed. But trust was hard when you had been let down so many times before. "2 weeks," she said again. "Prove yourself in 2 weeks and we will talk about you staying longer." Ezra nodded, accepting the boundary without argument. 2 weeks. The afternoon passed quickly, with Ezra working on the fences while Beatrice handled the other daily tasks that kept the ranch running. She fed the chickens, collected eggs, weeded the vegetable garden that provided most of her food, checked on the small herd of cattle grazing in the north pasture. It was exhausting work, made more difficult by the heat and her injured shoulder, but it was also familiar. It was the work her father had done, and doing it made her feel connected to him. When evening came, she made supper and brought it to the bunkhouse again. This time, Ezra invited her in without hesitation, and they ate together at the small table, talking about the ranch, about the horses, about small, inconsequential things that somehow felt important. Beatrice learned that Ezra liked his coffee strong and black, that he could read and write fluently, which was not as common among ranch hands as it should be, and that he had a quiet sense of humor that caught her off guard. "You should have seen the look on that mare's face when I tried to put the halter on too soon," Ezra said, grinning. "She gave me this expression like I had personally insulted her entire family. I swear, horses can be more judgmental than people." Beatrice laughed, a real laugh that felt strange after months of worry. "Rosie is definitely judgmental. She always has been. My father used to say she had opinions about everything." "Smart horses usually do," Ezra said. "The dumb ones are easier to train but less useful in the long run. Give me a horse with opinions any day. At least then I know they are thinking." They talked until the light faded and Beatrice realized with surprise that hours had passed. She stood reluctantly, gathering the empty plates. "I should let you get some rest. Tomorrow will be another long day." Ezra walked her to the door, and for a moment They stood there in the doorway, close enough that Beatrice could smell the soap he had used and the faint scent of leather that clung to his clothes. "Thank you for supper," he said, "and for the company. It has been a long time since I had someone to talk to like this." "Me too," Beatrice admitted. "I did not realize how lonely I was until now." "You are not alone anymore," Ezra said softly. "Not while I am here." Beatrice walked back to the house with her heart doing strange things in her chest. And she lay awake for a long time that night thinking about gray eyes and steady hands, and the way he had said her name. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost too comfortable. Beatrice would wake before dawn, make breakfast, and bring it to Ezra. They would eat together, sometimes in the bunkhouse, sometimes sitting on the porch of the main house, watching the sun rise over the Texas hills. Then Ezra would work with the horses while Beatrice handled the other ranch tasks, and in the afternoons, they would work together on whatever needed doing: fences, barn repairs, checking the cattle. The horses progressed faster than Beatrice had dared to hope. By the end of the first week, all three of them were allowing Ezra to handle them, accepting the halter and lead rope without panic. Rosie was still the most skittish, still prone to shying away if Ezra moved too quickly, but even she was coming around. The gray gelding, whom Beatrice had started calling Storm because of his coloring, turned out to be the easiest. He was young enough that the bad training had not set in too deep, and he seemed almost eager to please once he understood what was being asked of him. The chestnut stallion was the most challenging, not because he was afraid but because he was proud. He did not want to submit to anyone, and Ezra had to earn every bit of progress through patience and respect. Beatrice watched him work with the stallion whom she had named Rusty and saw the same qualities in both of them: strength, stubbornness, a deep need for independence. It made sense that they would challenge each other, but it was not just the horses that were changing. Beatrice was changing too. The constant fear and anxiety that had been her companion for months was fading, replaced by something she was afraid to name. She found herself looking forward to mornings, to the conversations over breakfast, to the way Ezra smiled when she brought him lunch in the middle of a hot afternoon. She noticed small things: the way he always made sure she took the chair while he sat on something less comfortable, the way he fixed things without being asked, the way he listened when she talked like her words actually mattered. One evening, as they sat on the porch after supper, Ezra asked, "What will you do with the ranch after you deliver the horses? I mean long term." Beatrice had been watching the stars come out, but she turned to look at him. "I want to keep it, build it up the way my father always planned." He wanted to breed quality horses, not just sell wild ones that needed breaking. He wanted this place to be known for having the best horses in West Texas. "That is a good dream," Ezra said. "It will take time, though. Years, probably. I know, but I have time if I can just get past this debt." She paused, then asked, "What about you? You said you wanted to buy your own place someday. Is that still the plan?" Ezra was quiet for so long that Beatrice thought he was not going to answer. Then he said, "I thought it was. I spent 15 years saving money, working my way up from ranch hand to foreman, learning everything I could about running a place. I had almost enough to make an offer on a small property in Colorado when I lost it all. Lost it how? Trusted the wrong person." His voice was flat, emotionless. "My partner, or the man I thought was my partner, took the money and disappeared. Turned out he had been planning it for months. By the time I realized what had happened, he was long gone, and so was every penny I had saved." Beatrice felt anger rise up on his behalf. "Did you try to find him?" "For a while. But men like that, they know how to disappear. And even if I found him, what then? The money is gone, spent or hidden somewhere. I will never find it. All I can do is start over." He looked at her, and there was something vulnerable in his expression that made her chest ache. "That is why I am here. That is why I was willing to work for just meals and a place to stay. I have nothing left, Beatrice. Everything I built, everything I worked for, it is gone. So when I rode into Terlingua and heard about a woman trying to run a ranch on her own, about horses that needed training and a place that needed help, it felt like maybe the universe was giving me a chance to do something that mattered while I figured out what comes next." Beatrice reached out without thinking and placed her hand on his. His skin was warm, his palm rough with calluses, and when his fingers closed around hers, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I am glad you are here," she said. "I do not know what I would have done without you these past 2 weeks." 2 weeks, Ezra said, and there was a question in his voice. "My time is up tomorrow. Have I proved myself?" Beatrice looked at him, at this man who had appeared in her life at exactly the moment she needed him most, who had asked for so little and given so much. The truth was, she had stopped thinking of him as temporary help days ago. Somewhere between the morning conversations and the shared work and the quiet evenings on the porch, he had become something more, something essential. "Stay," she said. "Not for 2 weeks or 2 months, just stay. I cannot pay you much, not yet, but once the ranch is profitable again, I will give you a fair wage, and if you want to save up for your own place, I will help however I can. But I need you here, Ezra. The ranch needs you." "I need you," she wanted to add but did not, because that felt like too much truth for one night. Ezra studied her face in the dim light from the windows behind them. "Are you sure? People in town might talk. Single woman, single man living on the same property. You know how that goes." "Let them talk," Beatrice said with more confidence than she felt. "They have been talking about me since my father died. One more thing for them to gossip about will not make any difference. It might make it harder for you, might make the bank less willing to work with you. The bank will work with me when I prove I can make this ranch profitable. That is all they care about." She squeezed his hand. "Please stay." Ezra turned his hand over so their palms were pressed together and he laced his fingers through hers. "All right, I will stay. For as long as you want me here." "Good," Beatrice said, and they sat like that for a long time, holding hands in the darkness, neither of them quite ready to name what was happening between them, but both knowing it was something that mattered. The next day, Ezra began the real work of training the horses to accept a saddle and rider. Beatrice watched from the fence as he introduced Storm to the saddle blanket first, letting the young gelding smell it and see it before draping it gently across his back. Storm danced nervously for a moment but did not bolt, and Ezra praised him with a steady stream of quiet words and gentle touches. It took most of the morning before Storm was comfortable enough with the blanket that Ezra could move on to the saddle itself. Beatrice had expected the horse to panic when the weight settled on his back, but Ezra was so gradual, so patient, that Storm barely seemed to notice the transition. By lunchtime, the gelding was walking around the corral with the saddle in place, still nervous but not terrified. "You make it look so easy," Beatrice said when Ezra took a break to eat the sandwiches she had brought. "It is not easy," Ezra said. "It is just about breaking everything down into small enough steps that the horse never feels overwhelmed. People try to rush, throw the saddle on and expect the horse to accept it, and then they wonder why the horse fights. But if you take your time, let them adjust to each new thing before moving on to the next, they learn that new things are not scary." "Is that how you learned? From your father?" "Mostly. Though I have picked up things from other trainers over the years too. Everyone has something to teach if you are willing to listen." He finished his sandwich and stood, brushing crumbs from his pants. "I am going to try riding him this afternoon." Just a few minutes to see how he handles my weight. Do you want to watch? Of course, Beatrice said, though the thought of Ezra getting on an unbroken horse made her nervous. She had seen too many men injured or killed by horses that panicked with a rider on their back. But when Ezra finally swung up into the saddle that afternoon, Storm barely reacted. The gelding's ears flicked back, listening to the man on his back, but he did not buck or bolt. Ezra sat quietly, letting Storm get used to the feeling, and then he asked the horse to walk. Storm took a hesitant step, then another, and within minutes they were circling the corral at a calm, steady pace. Beatrice found herself holding her breath, afraid to move or make a sound that might break the spell. When Ezra finally dismounted and praised Storm with a proud pat on the neck, she realized she had tears in her eyes. "That was beautiful," she said when Ezra walked over to the fence. "I have never seen anything like that." "He is a good horse," Ezra said, but there was satisfaction in his voice. "Give me another week and he will be ready to deliver. The other two will take a bit longer, but we are on track." "On track," Beatrice repeated, and the relief that flooded through her was almost overwhelming. "We might actually do this. We might actually save the ranch." "We will do this," Ezra said with certainty. "I promise you, Beatrice, we will do this." That night after supper, Beatrice worked up the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her for days. They were on the porch again, which had become their place, and the night was warm and full of cricket song. "What will you do after the horses are sold?" she asked. "I mean, you said you wanted your own place. Will you leave once the ranch is stable?" Ezra did not answer right away. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes on the stars overhead. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," Beatrice said, more forcefully than she intended. "I do not want you to leave, I want you to stay. But I also do not want to hold you back from your dreams. You have already helped me so much. If you need to move on, I will understand." "What if my dreams have changed?" Ezra said quietly. "What if I am starting to think that maybe owning my own place is not as important as I thought it was?" Beatrice's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "What do you mean?" Ezra turned to look at her, and in the dim light she could see the intensity in his eyes. "I mean that I have spent 15 years focused on one goal, so focused that I did not let myself want anything else. But being here, working with you, it has made me realize that maybe I was chasing the wrong thing. Maybe what I really wanted was not a place of my own, but a place where I belonged, a place where I was needed." "You are needed here," Beatrice said. Her voice was shaking. "You are needed very much." Ezra stood and moved closer, kneeling down so they were at eye level. "I am not just talking about the work, Beatrice. I am talking about you, about the way I feel when I am around you. About how every morning I wake up looking forward to seeing you, and every night I lie awake thinking about what you said or how you smiled at something. I am talking about the fact that somewhere in the past 2 weeks, I stopped thinking of this as a job and started thinking of it as home." Beatrice felt tears spill down her cheeks. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I tried not to. I tried to tell myself it was just gratitude or relief at having help, but it is more than that. It is so much more than that." Ezra reached up and gently wiped the tears from her face with his thumb. "I do not have much to offer you. I do not have land or money or anything that most men bring to a woman. But I have these hands, and I have knowledge, and I have a heart that is yours if you want it. I will work every day to help you build this ranch into what your father dreamed it could be. I will stand beside you and fight with you and never ask you to be anything other than exactly who you are. And if that is enough, if I am enough, then I want to stay. Not as hired help, but as your partner, in all the ways that matter." Beatrice could hardly breathe. "Are you asking what I think you are asking?" "I am asking if you would consider letting me be part of your life. Not just your ranch hand, not just your friend, but something more. I am asking if you feel what I feel, and if you do, then maybe we could figure out what that means together." Beatrice did not trust herself to speak, so instead she did what her heart had been urging her to do for days. She leaned forward and kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, soft and tentative, more question than answer. But Ezra responded immediately, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her head, the other settling at her waist. The kiss deepened, and Beatrice felt something in her chest open up, something warm and bright and terrifying in the best possible way. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ezra rested his forehead against hers. "I will take that as a yes." Beatrice laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "That is definitely a yes." They sat together on the porch until late into the night, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for the ranch and for a future that suddenly seemed full of possibility. When Ezra finally walked back to the bunkhouse, Beatrice stood on the porch and watched him go, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. The next few weeks were the happiest Beatrice could remember in a long time. Ezra worked with the horses every day, and by the time the cattle buyer from El Paso arrived to collect them, all three were trained well enough to ride without issue. The buyer was impressed, so impressed that he paid the full amount owed plus a bonus for the quality of the training. "I will be back next year," the buyer said as he loaded the horses into his wagon. "If you can train them all like this, I will buy every horse you can provide." Beatrice felt like she could fly. With the money from the sale, she was able to pay off a significant portion of the debt to the bank, enough that they agreed to extend her loan and give her more time to make the ranch profitable. For the first time since her father's death, she felt like she might actually survive this. But the best part was not the money or the bank's agreement. The best part was coming back to the ranch and seeing Ezra waiting for her on the porch, a smile on his face and pride in his eyes. "You did it," he said when she climbed down from the wagon. "You saved your father's ranch." "We did it," Beatrice corrected, walking into his arms without hesitation. "I could not have done any of this without you." Ezra held her close, and Beatrice felt the tension she had been carrying for months finally drain away. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other, and then Ezra said, "There is something I want to ask you." Beatrice pulled back to look at him. "What is it?" "Marry me," Ezra said. "I know it is fast, and I know we have only known each other for a few weeks, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Beatrice. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you fight for what matters. I love that you make the best biscuits I have ever tasted, and that you talk to the horses like they can understand you. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I am worthy of you. So marry me. Be my wife and let me be your husband, and we will build this ranch together into something amazing." Beatrice felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Ezra. I think I have loved you since the day you showed up and refused to let me do everything alone." Ezra kissed her then, a deep, passionate kiss that left them both breathless. When they broke apart, he said, "I will stay too, Beatrice. For as long as you will have me, I will stay." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Terlingua, with half the town in attendance, despite the gossip that had swirled about them. The minister who had once suggested Beatrice sell the ranch performed the ceremony, and if he had any reservations about the speed of the courtship, he kept them to himself. Beatrice wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and Ezra wore a new suit that he had bought with part of his share of the horse sale money. Beatrice had insisted he take a share, and after much argument, Ezra had agreed to accept it. "Only because I want to buy you something nice," he had said. "Only because you deserve more than a husband who comes to you with empty pockets." The wedding was simple but perfect, and when Ezra slipped the ring onto her finger, Beatrice felt a sense of rightness that went bone deep. This was what she was meant to do, who she was meant to be with. The ranch, the horses, Ezra, it was all connected, all part of a life she was building from the ruins of her grief. That night, in the house that had been her father's and was now theirs, Ezra made love to her with the same patience and care he showed with the horses. He learned her body the way he learned everything, paying attention to what made her sigh or gasp, building her pleasure slowly until she was trembling in his arms. It was tender and intense, and everything Beatrice had not known she was missing. Afterward, lying tangled together in the sheets, Ezra said, "I meant what I said. I am staying. I am not going anywhere." "Good," Beatrice said, running her fingers through his hair, "because I am not letting you go. I will train your horses and mend your fences and help you build this ranch into the best in Texas," Ezra continued. "And I will love you every day for the rest of my life. That is my promise to you. And I promise to stand beside you, to be your partner in all things and to love you just as fiercely," Beatrice said. "We are in this together now." "Together," Ezra agreed, and he kissed her again. And Beatrice thought that of all the things she had inherited from her father, the ranch was not the most important. The most important was the strength to keep going when things were hard, the courage to accept help when it was offered, and the wisdom to recognize love when it walked into her life. The months that followed were not easy. Running a ranch never was. But they were good months, filled with hard work and small victories, and the kind of deep contentment that came from building something meaningful with someone you loved. Ezra proved to be as good as his word, working tirelessly to help Beatrice realize her father's dream of breeding quality horses. They started small, purchasing a mare with good bloodlines and breeding her to a stallion from a ranch 3 counties over. The foal that arrived the following spring was strong and healthy, with the kind of conformation that promised speed and endurance. Ezra trained the foal from birth, handling it every day so it grew up trusting humans, and by the time it was old enough to ride, it was already being talked about by ranchers throughout West Texas. Word spread about the quality of the horses coming from the Oakley Ranch, and buyers started arriving with increasing frequency. Some wanted horses to ride, others wanted breeding stock, and all of them were willing to pay fair prices for animals that had been trained with patience and respect. The ranch began to prosper in ways it never had under Beatrice's father, not because Ezra was a better rancher but because there were 2 of them now, working together, covering twice as much ground. The bank loan was paid off within 2 years. Beatrice cried when she made the final payment, overwhelmed by the realization that the ranch was truly hers, free and clear. Ezra held her and let her cry, understanding that these were tears of relief as much as joy. "Your father would be proud," he said. "You did what he could not. You saved this place." "We saved it," Beatrice corrected, as she always did. "This is yours as much as mine now." It was true. Over the past 2 years, Ezra had put his mark on the ranch in countless ways. He had built a new barn with stalls designed specifically for foaling mares. He had expanded the corral and added a covered training area for working with horses during the hottest parts of summer. He had even planted trees along the eastern property line to provide shade for the cattle during the brutal Texas summers. Every improvement was made with care and thought, and every one of them made the ranch more efficient and more profitable. But it was not just the physical improvements that mattered. Ezra had brought something else to the ranch, something intangible but essential. He had brought stability and partnership, and the sense that Beatrice was not alone anymore. They made decisions together, planned together, celebrated successes, and weathered failures together. It was the kind of marriage Beatrice had not known she wanted until she had it. And now she could not imagine her life any other way. By their third anniversary, the ranch was thriving. They had expanded the herd, hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increased workload, and established a reputation for quality that extended beyond Texas. Buyers came from as far as New Mexico and Colorado, drawn by stories of horses trained with a gentle hand and a patient heart. On the morning of their anniversary, Beatrice woke to find Ezra already up and dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed with a wrapped package in his hands. "Happy anniversary," he said, handing her the package. "I wanted to give you something special." Beatrice sat up and took the package, curious. Ezra was not usually one for grand gestures or expensive gifts. When she unwrapped it, she found a beautiful leather journal, hand-tooled with her initials on the cover. "It is for recording the horses," Ezra explained. "Bloodlines, training notes, sales records, all of it. Your father never kept detailed records, but I think we should. This ranch, what we are building here, it is going to last beyond us. Someday we will have children who will inherit it, and I want them to have a record of how it all started. How their mother saved the family ranch and built it into something incredible." Beatrice felt tears well up, as they often did these days. She was 3 months pregnant, though they had not told anyone outside of each other yet. The pregnancy had been a surprise, though a welcome one, and Beatrice had spent the past few weeks trying to imagine what kind of mother she would be. "Thank you," she said, running her fingers over the tooled leather. "This is perfect. And speaking of children, there is something I need to tell you." She had planned to wait, to make it special somehow, but sitting there on their anniversary morning with the sun streaming through the windows and Ezra looking at her with so much love in his eyes, the moment felt right. "I am pregnant," she said. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Ezra just stared at her, and Beatrice worried that he was not ready, that this was too soon despite their talks about someday starting a family. But then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Beatrice, that is the best news you could have given me. The absolute best." "You are happy?" Beatrice asked, even though she could feel his happiness in the way he held her. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Ezra said. He pulled back to look at her, his hands cradling her face. "I love you so much. And I cannot wait to meet this baby, to teach them everything I know, to watch them grow up on this ranch that we built together." "Them," Beatrice teased. "You think it is more than one, who knows? Twins run in my family." Ezra grinned. "But 1 or 2 or 10, I will love them all. Just like I love you." The pregnancy was not easy. The Texas heat was oppressive, and Beatrice's body seemed to rebel against the changes it was going through. But Ezra was there through all of it, patient and supportive, taking on more of the ranch work so Beatrice could rest. He brought her cool water when she was overheated, rubbed her swollen feet when they ached, and held her hair back during the morning sickness that lasted well into her 2nd trimester. "I feel useless," Beatrice complained one afternoon when she was too tired to do more than sit on the porch and watch Ezra work with the horses. "I should be helping." "You are helping," Ezra said, joining her on the porch after finishing the training session. "You are growing our child. That is the most important job there is." "I am serious, Ezra. I hate being sidelined like this. I know you do. But your body is doing something extraordinary right now, and it needs rest to do it properly. Let me handle the ranch work. You just focus on taking care of yourself and the baby." He placed a hand on her stomach, which was just starting to show a small bump. Besides, I like taking care of you. It gives me a chance to prove I am worthy of you every single day." "You proved that years ago," Beatrice said, covering his hand with hers. "The day you showed up and refused to let me fail, that is when you proved it." The baby came in early February, during a cold snap that was unusual for Terlingua. Beatrice's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Ezra feared he might lose her. The midwife from town stayed throughout, calm and competent, but even she looked worried at times. Ezra stayed by Beatrice's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement when she said she could not do it anymore. "You can do this," he told her. "You are the strongest person I know. You saved a ranch when everyone said you could not. You can bring our baby into the world. I believe in you." And finally, after hours of labor, the baby arrived. A boy, healthy and screaming, with dark hair like his father and his mother's determined expression. The midwife placed him in Beatrice's arms, and Ezra watched his wife fall in love all over again, this time with their son. "He is perfect," Beatrice whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He is absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Ezra asked, reaching out to touch one tiny hand. His son's fingers wrapped around his thumb, and Ezra felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. Beatrice thought for a moment. "James," she said, "after my father." "James Henry Patterson." "James Henry," Ezra repeated, testing the name. "I like it. James Henry Patterson, welcome to the world." The first few months of parenthood were exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. James was a fussy baby, colicky and difficult to soothe, but he was theirs, and both Beatrice and Ezra loved him fiercely. They took turns walking him when he cried at night, took turns changing diapers and preparing bottles when Beatrice's milk supply proved insufficient. The ranch work continued around the demands of the baby, and there were days when both of them were so tired they could barely function. But there were also perfect moments. James smiling for the first time, reaching for his mother's face, making sounds that would eventually become words. Ezra would come in from working with the horses to find Beatrice nursing James in the rocking chair her father had made, sunlight streaming through the windows, and he would think that this was what he had been looking for all those years. He thought he wanted his own ranch. Not land or independence, but family, belonging, home. As James grew from infant to toddler, he showed an early fascination with the horses. He would stand at the corral fence, his small hands gripping the rails, watching his father work with wide, curious eyes. Ezra started taking him into the corral, holding him carefully while the horses sniffed at him, and learned that this small human was part of the family. "You are going to be a horseman, just like your daddy," Beatrice said one afternoon, watching Ezra let James pet one of the gentle mares. "I can already tell." "Maybe," Ezra said. "Or maybe he will want to do something completely different. Either way, he will have options. That is what we are building here, Beatrice. We are building a life where our children have choices." When James was 2 years old, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, her body more prepared for what was coming. And this time, when labor started on a warm October evening, it progressed quickly. Their daughter was born just before midnight, smaller than her brother had been, but with the same dark hair and determined expression. "Caroline," Beatrice said immediately, looking down at her daughter. "After my mother, Caroline Grace." "Caroline Grace," Ezra repeated, and he thought about how far they had come from that morning 4 years ago when he had ridden onto this ranch looking for work. He had been broken then, stripped of everything he thought mattered, starting over from nothing. And now he had everything. A wife he loved, 2 healthy children, a thriving ranch, and a future full of possibility. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the slow, steady growth of the ranch. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Caroline was different, wild and fearless, always getting into trouble, always pushing boundaries. They complemented each other perfectly, and watching them grow, Beatrice and Ezra marveled at how lucky they were. The ranch continued to prosper. The breeding program that Ezra had established produced horse after horse of exceptional quality, and the Oakley name became synonymous with excellence throughout Texas and beyond. They hired more hands as the operation grew, built a larger house with separate rooms for the children, and finally, 8 years after they were married, Ezra had saved enough money to become a full partner in the ranch officially. "You have always been a partner," Beatrice protested when he brought up the idea. "This has been yours as much as mine since the day we married." "I know," Ezra said, "but I want it to be official. I want my name on the deed alongside yours. I want everyone to know that this is our ranch, built by both of us together." So they went to the land office in town and had the deed changed to read Oakley and Patterson Ranch. And when they rode back home, Beatrice felt like they had closed one chapter and opened another. This was no longer her father's ranch that she was trying to save. This was their ranch, hers and Ezra's, and someday it would belong to James and Caroline. When James was 10 and Caroline was 8, Ezra decided it was time to teach them formally about horse training. He had been including them in the work for years, of course, letting them help with feeding and grooming and basic care. But now, he wanted to teach them the more advanced skills that had been passed down from his father. "Training a horse is not about dominance," he told them one morning in the corral, with a young filly standing patiently nearby. "It is about partnership. You have to learn to listen to what the horse is telling you, to read their body language and understand what they need. Some horses need firm guidance, others need gentleness. Your job as a trainer is to figure out what each individual horse needs and give it to them." James listened with rapt attention, asking questions and making notes in the journal his mother had started keeping when he was born. Caroline was more interested in doing than listening, and within minutes she was in the corral trying to pet the filly despite Ezra's instructions to wait. "Caroline, patience," Beatrice called from where she sat on the fence. She was pregnant again, 7 months along with their third child, and Ezra had insisted she stay off her feet as much as possible. "But she likes me," Caroline protested, and remarkably, the filly did seem calm with the little girl, allowing Caroline to stroke her neck. Ezra and Beatrice exchanged a look. "She has a gift," Ezra admitted, "just like her mother." Their third child, another boy they named Michael, was born in March. He was the easiest of the three, a calm, happy baby who seemed content just to observe the chaos around him. With 3 children, the house was never quiet, but it was full of love and laughter and the kind of controlled chaos that came with a family. As the children grew older, they each found their place in the ranch. James became Ezra's apprentice, learning everything his father could teach him about training and breeding horses. Caroline took after her mother, showing a particular talent for the business side of things, keeping records and negotiating with buyers. Michael, when he was old enough, became fascinated with the land itself, learning about cattle and crops and how to maximize the productivity of their acres. Beatrice and Ezra watched their children grow with a sense of profound satisfaction. They had built something that would last, something that would provide for generations to come. And they had done it together, through hard work and perseverance and love. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Ezra took Beatrice up to a hill that overlooked the ranch. They left the children with the ranch hands for the afternoon, and they rode up together on two of the horses they had trained themselves, taking their time and enjoying the rare moment of solitude. From the top of the hill, they could see everything. The house they had expanded and improved over the years, the barns and corrals where so many horses had been born and trained, the pastures where cattle grazed, the creek that ran through the property, providing water year-round. And in the distance, the town of Terlingua, small and quiet in the afternoon heat. "We did all right, did we not?" Beatrice said, leaning against Ezra's side as they stood looking out over their land. "We did more than all right," Ezra said. "We built something incredible. Your father would be proud." "I think he would be more proud that we did it together. He always said the strongest ranches were the ones built on partnership, not just ownership." Ezra turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Do you remember the first thing I said to you, after I watched you struggling with Rosie? You said easy now, but you were talking to the horse, not me," Beatrice said, smiling at the memory. "And then I told you I was looking for work, and you did not want my help, but you took it anyway because you were desperate." "I was desperate," Beatrice agreed, "and stubborn. And probably more than a little bit rude." "You were perfect," Ezra said. "You were everything I did not know I was looking for. And when you gave me 3 days to prove myself, I knew I had to make it count, because I had this feeling, this crazy feeling that I had just met the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with." "Did you really? Or are you just saying that now?" "I really did," Ezra said. "I know it sounds impossible, but from the moment I saw you standing in that corral, trying so hard to do everything yourself, I wanted to help you. And then I got to know you, and wanting to help turned into needing to stay. And needing to stay turned into loving you so completely that I could not imagine being anywhere else." Beatrice felt the familiar sting of tears, though these days she cried as easily from happiness as from sadness. "I love you too. I have loved you since the day you told me to rest my shoulder and checked on the cattle yourself. Since the day you proved that accepting help did not mean I was weak, it just meant I was smart enough to know when I needed it." "And do you still need me?" Ezra asked, though his tone was teasing. "Now that the ranch is successful and the children are growing up and everything we worked for is secure, I will always need you," Beatrice said. "Not because of the ranch or the horses or any of the practical reasons. I need you because you are my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. I need you because without you none of this would mean anything. The ranch would just be land and buildings. With you, it is home." Ezra kissed her then, a long, sweet kiss full of 15 years of love and partnership. When they pulled apart, he said, "I told you that first day that I would stay. I meant it then and I mean it now. I am staying, Beatrice. For the rest of my life I am staying right here with you." "Good," Beatrice said, "because I am not letting you go. Not ever." They stayed on the hill until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and pink. Then they rode back down to the ranch, to the house full of children and noise and life, to the work that would never truly be finished, to the future they were building together one day at a time. The years that followed brought the usual mixture of joy and sorrow. Ezra's hair went gray, and Beatrice's hands grew rough with years of work. James married at 22, bringing his wife to live on the ranch and start a family of his own. Caroline, true to form, decided she wanted to go to school in Houston to study business, promising to come back and help expand the ranch's operations. Michael stayed close to home, eventually taking over management of the cattle operation. Through it all, Beatrice and Ezra remained partners in every sense of the word. They still made decisions together, still sat on the porch in the evenings talking about the day, still found moments to steal away and remember what brought them together in the first place. The ranch grew and prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in West Texas, known not just for the quality of its horses but for the integrity of the family that ran it. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a party. The ranch was full of people. More than 100 friends and family gathered to celebrate 3 decades of marriage and partnership. There were speeches and toasts, stories about the early days when Beatrice was struggling alone, and Ezra appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known to say. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had gone home and the grandchildren were asleep, Beatrice and Ezra found themselves alone on the porch again. It was their place. It had always been their place, and sitting there in the comfortable silence they had perfected over 30 years, Beatrice thought about everything they had been through together. "You have any regrets?" she asked. "About staying here instead of having your own place?" Ezra reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite the years. "Not a single one. This is my place, Beatrice. It has been since the day I arrived, and you are my everything. The ranch, the horses, the children, it is all wonderful, but you are what makes it matter. You are why I stayed." "I am glad you did," Beatrice said softly. "I do not know what would have happened to me if you had not. I probably would have lost the ranch, lost everything. But more than that, I would have lost the chance to know what real love feels like, what partnership means, what it is to build a life with someone who sees you as an equal." "You would have survived," Ezra said. "You are the strongest person I know, but I am grateful I got to be here for it, that I got to help carry the load and share the victories, that I got to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. That has been the real privilege, Beatrice. Not the ranch or the success, but you. Always you." They sat together as the stars came out, holding hands in the darkness. Two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built something that would last long after they were gone. The ranch would continue, passed down through generations, a testament to what two people could create when they refused to give up and refused to face the world alone. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right across the Texas hills, you could almost hear the echoes of that first conversation, when a woman struggling with unruly horses met a cowboy who knew how to help, and he said the words that would change both their lives forever. "I will stay too." Years later, when Beatrice was 75 and Ezra was 81, they would sit on that same porch and watch their great-grandchildren play in the yard. The ranch had expanded beyond anything they could have imagined in those early days, with additional properties and a reputation that extended across the entire Southwest. But the heart of it remained the same. The original house, the barns and corrals where Ezra had first trained those 3 unruly horses, the land that Beatrice's father had claimed and she had fought to keep. "We did good," Ezra said one evening, his voice a bit weaker than it used to be, but still carrying that same quiet strength that had drawn Beatrice to him all those years ago. "We did," Beatrice agreed. Her hair was completely white now, and her hands shook with age, but her eyes were still bright with the determination that had kept her going through the darkest times. "We built something that will last. More than that," Ezra said. "We loved well. That is what really matters. The ranch is just wood and land and animals. The love, the family, the life we built together, that is what lasts." Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder, fitting against him the same way she had for more than 50 years. "I would do it all again, you know. Every hard day, every struggle, every moment of uncertainty. I would do it all again just to end up right here with you." "So would I," Ezra said, kissing the top of her head. "So would I." They stayed on the porch until the sun set, surrounded by the sounds of family and ranch life, held together by a love that had started with 3 unruly horses and a cowboy who promised to stay. And he had stayed through everything, just as he said he would. Not just as hired help or a business partner, but as the love of her life, the father of her children, and the builder of her dreams. That night, tucked into the bed they had shared for over 50 years, Beatrice said, "Thank you for staying." "Thank you for letting me," Ezra replied. "Thank you for trusting me when you had every reason not to. Thank you for building this life with me." "I love you," Beatrice said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Ezra said. "Always have, always will." They fell asleep holding hands, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and created something beautiful. The ranch would continue without them eventually, run by children and grandchildren who had learned the lessons they taught about hard work and integrity and love. But the legacy they left was not just the land or the horses or the buildings. It was the example they set of what real partnership looked like, of what could be accomplished when 2 people decided to face the world together rather than alone. And somewhere in the night, if you listened carefully, you could hear the sound of horses moving peacefully in their stalls, content and well cared for, a testament to the man who had once said he knew how to train them and the woman who had been brave enough to let him try. Together they had built a life, a family, and a legacy that would endure for generations. The end.